Welcome, everybody, to today's edition of Inside JMS. Stories from the faculty and staff of the Hank Greenspun School of Journalism and Media Studies. Today, as our guest, of course, I have my co-host here, Dr. Dave Norse.
Always a pleasure, friend.
Our guest today is Benjamin Morse, a.k.a. social media guru, comic knowledgeable aficionado.
Sure.
I mean, this is a guy that knows what it's like to write about comics and talk about superheroes.
Absolutely.
So the first thing we need to ask him is, why is Magneto your research subject?
So when I came here to UNLV, I did not have a master's degree. And you, Dr. Stoker, encouraged me to seek one out, which I appreciated. And early on, I was told that if you're going to be writing in excess of 80 pages about something, it's got to be something that you're interested in. So I had initially, my outside looking in perspective was, I've got to do something very, academic and then I forget who it was who told me, but someone said, well, why don't you just do it about comics? Because you know comics, obviously worked in comics for years. So Magneto was near and dear to me in the sense that I grew up in a Jewish suburb in Boston, and I was one of the few non-Jewish kids because my mom was Unitarian. So I learned a lot about the Holocaust from X-Men comics because Magneto was a Holocaust survivor. And this helped me. I felt a little like adrift when I was a kid, just in the sense that everyone around me had their shared faith and I didn't really have that. And being able to tap into it somewhat by experiencing that through X-Men was something that always stuck with me. So when I had the opportunity to do a research project, I thought, well, Magneto and the X-Men were such an incredible teaching tool for me when I was younger. Why don't I see if I can write about this and do some research about it? And it turned out there was quite a bit of research already done on the subject, which is very helpful. So
that's great.
Yeah.
So what sparked this interest in comics as a kid?
I initially it was pure kid stuff, just like I like the superpowers, I like the costumes, I like that. Honestly, what I was talking about is really where it came about in about 1992. The X-Men cartoon series debuted. I was 10 years old, and it really struck a chord with me that I was at the right age to be exposed to something that this is not just something about superheroes per se. It's not just Superman saving a cat from a tree or something. There's some really interesting discussion going on here about marginalization and bigotry and how you kind of push back against that. And I think I was always even as a kid, I was very socially conscious in the sense that I was like, I want to do good in the world. And superheroes to me that was kind of my in. I wasn't surrounded by a lot of like my father was in healthcare, which I thought was very, was a noble profession. But this idea of like making the world a better place always stuck with me. It was something I was always fascinated by. I was like, how do we help people, and how do we, affect things greater? How do I become something greater than myself? And with superheroes, particularly with the X-Men, I felt like I saw that, and it really attracted me. So on one level, it's like, oh, cool, they have bright red and yellow costumes. And then on another level, it was, oh no, they're affecting change in a positive way and actually making the world a better place.
Is there a particular storyline out of any of the comics that you have kind of paid close attention to where you really felt like, okay, I kind of see myself in this storyline?
Actually, jumping completely over, because I know Dr. Stoker's going to ambush me at some point anyways and say, why is the Flash your favorite superhero? And the reason, even though I was so into X-Men, my ultimate favorite superhero is the Flash. And what stuck with me was, not everyone knows this, if you watch the Flash TV show, it's Barry Allen is the Flash. But when I was reading comics as a kid, Barry Allen, the original Flash from DC Comics, had heroically given his life back in like 1986. So I'm reading comics in the 90s. He's been dead for 10 years. And his sidekick, his nephew, Wally West, took over. And I always saw myself in Wally. I always saw myself because I saw myself as being like a younger person trying to live up to the expectations of the generation ahead of me. I saw that like with my parents were both incredible people who I looked up to a great deal, a lot of like uncles and stuff like that. Just like I looked up to the people above me and I really wanted to live up to their legacy. So I always connected with Wally West on that level. And then when I started working in comics, I was fortunate enough to get a job working at Wizard Magazine right after college. And then I was at Marvel by the time I was like 24. So I was one of the younger people there. And I always had this younger person trying to make it. And given where I ended up as a college professor, it's like spun on its head now. But I always felt like the kid in the room trying to prove himself. So for that reason, a lot of the Wally West Flash stories, particularly there's one called Return of Barry Allen, where it seems like his uncle comes back, but it turns out it's really a villain impersonating him. And it's kind of a big crucible for him because it's him finally facing the fact that, oh, even though I thought I was my own man, I've really been just waiting for him to come back. And now that I know he's not coming back, how do I kind of like forge ahead with my own identity?
Wow.
Hey, Ben gets pretty deep on these things.
This is all I think about.
The thing is, we hired Ben from Marvel, essentially. He was the digital editor there. Had been there 10 years and everything else. And really had some fascinating experiences there. But, I think it's interesting that you started out as a journalist and a writer.
Right.
And wrote about what you knew, which was comics.
Yeah, I went to school at Connecticut College, and they did not have a journalism program there. I went there because I liked the campus. My parents encouraged me to look at other schools. I definitely probably would have had a very different path if I had gone to Syracuse or Boston University or some of the other places I applied to. But I was really diehard about going to this college. And once I got there, I got my English degree, but there weren't a lot of journalism classes, but journalism was what I was interested in. So I really had experience working on the school newspaper. Like that was, to me, the most important thing I was doing in college was working on the newspaper. The classes were kind of, as long as I could pass them, I really wanted to get experience working on the newspaper. And then when I was about to graduate, I've told all my students this story, but basically I interned at my local paper, the Newton Tab. And the difference between working on your school newspaper where you can kind of write about whatever you're interested in versus working on the local beat where it's kind of like go take the minutes of the school board meeting and stuff like that. I just was like, I don't know that this is what I want to be doing with my life right now. And I had a very fateful lunch with my father, who I kind of expressed this to him. I was like, I don't know that the traditional newspaper path that I've been preparing for myself is really where I want to go. And he was the one who said, well, you should, to what you were just saying, Dr. Stoker. He's like, well, you're very passionate about comics. He goes, you're passionate about two things. You're passionate about professional wrestling and comics, and I don't want you doing anything with professional wrestling. So is there anything you could do with comics? And I ended up, I already at that point, I had my own website that I ran that did like comic reviews and stuff like that. And I was fortunate through the website to be connected with some of the people working, like the writer of Flash, had reached out to me and said, if you're ever looking for any opportunities, let me know. And so what I did was I reached out to him, and summer after my senior year, he said, come out to San Diego Comic-Con, like pay your own way, figure out a way to get out here. I stayed at a motel about 30 minutes away from the convention because everything else was booked. But I met this guy. He introduced me to the people at Wizard, said, you're into journalism, you're into comics. This is a combination of the two. And that was kind of, exactly what you said. I started out as a journalist, but a journalist covering comics, which is exactly what I wanted to be doing.
So how did you initially connect with the writer of Flash? It was kind of like, were you this kid that was kind of like, okay, I'm interested in this? I'm going to write a letter to that person. I'm going to email him.
Well, I was talking to some students the other day, and they were like, "Oh, so did you connect on LinkedIn?" And I said, "There was no LinkedIn at this point." I go, "You guys are spoiled with your ability to connect online." I go, "No, literally, what I did was the website I ran would run reviews of different comics, and we happened to love this run on Flash, so we gave very heavy praise to it. And literally, just at the end of the column, it said, to contact. It had my email at the bottom of the contact info, and it wasn't me reaching out; it was him reaching out to me and actually saying like, "Hey, I really appreciate." I think he was just coming up as well. He ended up being a really big deal. He actually ran DC Comics for a little while. But at the time, he was kind of on his way up, and I was, trying to make my way. And it was just this confluence of him being like, I appreciate the kind words. If there's ever anything, this is where I learned a lot of lessons about like paying it forward. Because he was like, if there's anything I can ever do for you, let me know. And I tried to use that philosophy through my whole comics career. If there was ever, someone who I met on social media or at a convention, a kid who was interested and wanted to intern, one of my former interns is writing Captain America now. One of my former interns is working at MTV, doing all their social media. So I tried to make it a big thing of like, if I saw someone who was younger than me who had a passion for this, like, how can I help them? Because my wife hates it when I say that this guy got me my job in comics, because she's like, you got yourself a job in comics. But if he hadn't been kind to me and opened the door that I had to walk through, I don't think I would have had the opportunity.
So you got into comics. You wrote for this magazine for a few years.
Yes.
And then the magazine folded, right?
So I got out before they folded, but they did fold soon after.
He read the writing on the wall.
I saw what was coming. I mean, you could argue that they folded after I left, but I wouldn't contend that. I was at Wizard for 2 years. It was a great job to have when you're 22. You go and play frisbee with the guys at lunch, and it's all wonderful. But then I was the Marvel contact, and I was going into New York City every month and meeting with all the Marvel editors and basically saying they would pitch me on coverage. They were like, "We want you to cover this comic in Wizard." And I was there one day, and I got pulled into an office by the guy who was running the digital department, who said like, "Hey, I need someone to run the website. Do you want to come do this?" And it sounds like it's an easy decision because it's Marvel, but I loved my job at Wizard. I just knew, to Dave's point of seeing the writing on the wall, that it was a print magazine in 2007, and they weren't making any inroads towards digital. And I just I was like, I don't feel like this is something that's going to be around much longer. So as much as I love it, I'm going to move on. I mean, it was working at Marvel to start was challenging because first and foremost, I lived in New Jersey, so it was an hour and a half commute 2 ways on the train to get into New York City. When I worked at Wizard, I just drove 20 minutes to the office. So the commute was tough, and working for a corporate entity as opposed to working for a magazine is very different. It was a lot less journalism and a lot more marketing, which I didn't necessarily understand when I signed up for it, but I adjusted pretty quickly. But just the idea, I always give the example of when I was working at Wizard, if I didn't like something, I would say I didn't like something. When I was working at Marvel, if I read a Spider-Man comic that I didn't think was great, I still had to market it as the greatest thing in the world. And that's challenging, especially when you've got 60 comics coming out every week, and you've got to try to convince people every one of these comics is worth your money. So it was a shift.
We often hear about it, and we've had the great pleasure of getting to work with Ben Morse for the past several years. And we know not necessarily the listeners have, and one of the ongoing jokes our students have is, how long is it going to take before Ben mentions Marvel?
Happened just yesterday. Yeah.
The question
How long did it take?
10 minutes.
So
they point at their watch and they go, "It took you 10 minutes."
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, they're holding you to it here, bud. You have a reputation to maintain.
Which class was this?
This was 112. This was Intro to Digital and Social Media. It usually comes up quicker there than in podcasting, because in podcasting there's a lot of other experiences I can draw on. But with the digital media, it's going to come up at some point.
So what about your experience at Marvel give us kind of the inside look as to you alluded to, wow, this was hard, or maybe this wasn't as easy as I initially anticipated. Somebody who loves comics is going to get to write about comics, but all of a sudden you have 60 different comics coming at you a week, and you have to not pretend, but find a way to say why each one is great. What else about that job kind of, as you reflect back on it, really pushed you to grow, where you kind of maybe weren't as comfortable initially, or maybe you thought you'd be really comfortable, but instead you were like, wow, I really am surprised that I don't like doing this, or I used to not like it, but now I don't mind it as much.
The biggest lesson I learned early on at Marvel was being part of a machine, if that makes sense, being part of a larger entity. And this was a hard lesson to learn, but it was also an incredibly valuable lesson to learn, in the sense that I was coming from a small company where I was a big fish in a small pond. I could kind of do whatever I want. If I said, I want to write an 8-page article on Captain America this month, they were like, go ahead, do whatever you want. Now suddenly I get to Marvel and it's like, okay, so these are our priorities. These are the things that we're pushing. It's not just write about what you want to write about. And then I think the bigger lesson was, because I wasn't a marketing guy per se, I was a writer, and I had to lean heavily on the PR team to kind of show me the ropes of like, all right, well, how do we morph this journalism stuff into, it's still kind of journalism on the website, but really at the end of the day, we're trying to sell something. And I initially, one of my best friends, he's spoke to my classes a couple times. It's a guy named Arun Singh, brilliant PR guy, currently works at Skybound, which is what they put out The Walking Dead, but was previously at Marvel with me. And we hated each other at the beginning because he was a PR guy. And his thing was, all right, we're announcing the new writer of Avengers. We're going to get the most bang for our buck by going to Entertainment Weekly with this. But me, head of Marvel.com, I'm like, well, why aren't we breaking this story on Marvel.com so we can get more eyes on the website? And moving from whatever is most important to me is not necessarily what's most important to the rest of the company was a huge shift. But when I figured it out and it clicked, and Arun and I started really getting along, and it started becoming a thing of, all right, well, if you're going to announce the new writer of Avengers in Entertainment Weekly, at the end of the Entertainment Weekly interview, can you put a blurb saying, head to Marvel.com for more? And then I don't get the announcement, but I get maybe the first in-depth interview. And that way we're working together synergistically. That was like a huge thing. And then, as he likes to point out, I ended up being not his best man, but I was an usher in Arun's wedding. So we ended up working things out. He was in Vegas a couple weeks ago. We had a great chat. But I think that was the biggest thing, was just learning to be, and this reflects today, because I learned to be part of a team. I learned to not be like, what I need and my wants and my desires are not the end all be all of what's going on. And I think that reflects, honestly, like I even here at JMS, I feel like, I recognize that my top priority might not be in the department's best interest, might not be in the school's best interest. And I've tried to make myself a more valuable team player, because when I was 23, I was not a valuable team player. I was very selfish, and I had to learn those lessons. I learned them the hard way, but I appreciate what I got out of that.
So, learn to be unselfish. Is that, we can tie that back.
Yeah.
The fact is you have 2 kids now,
Yes.
and sweet wife, Megan, and tell us about how you met her and how that changed you.
We started dating when I was still in college. Someone asked me the other day. They said, "Oh, did you get your wife by playing the Marvel card?" And I said, 1, she was with me before I was at Marvel. 2, if you've ever met her, you would know she would not care. But we met in college. I'm 2 years older than her. We started dating right at when I was about to graduate. So we were long distance for the first couple of years. I was in New York. She was still in Connecticut. But she changed everything for me. Someone who supported me and kind of, was able to, she hated living on the East Coast, but did it for 13 years because she knew I was working my dream job. And when it came time to part ways with Marvel, and it wasn't acrimonious or anything like that, but it was more of a, I've been here 10 years. I think I kind of want to do something else. When that came about, she was so supportive. She did immediately say, can we move to Vegas right away? Because that's where her family is. But she really, kind of helped me through finding that. She adjusted with me. Like you said, I have 2 kids now. I spoke at BEA last week, and I was talking about podcasting, and I'm thinking about starting up I have a couple projects potentially in the hopper right now, as far as new podcasts. And someone in the crowd asked, they're like, well, how do you balance that with, school and family and all that other stuff? And I go, last time I started a podcast, I think I was 27, and I didn't have any kids. So it's going to be interesting to see how this experience plays out. But it's the best. I was thinking the other day about this is completely off the rails, but I was thinking about like best years of my life. And I was thinking back to, really good times with Megan, with Marvel, all this other stuff. But honestly, my son is going to be a year old in about a month. You guys both know because I texted you both from the hospital. But he's going to be a year coming up in a few weeks. And this past year of having both kids, because I feel like my family's really complete. I really wanted to have 2. And, being with Megan and settling in here to the job and everything like that. I honestly think like the last year has been one of the top 5. We won't say it's necessarily the best, but it's up there. It's up there.
That's great.
Well, it was really fascinating, how you ended up here.
Very.
I got here in fall of 2017, and the dean, I says, I need to find somebody to run our social media agency. Yeah. I want to create a social media agency. He says, how about this guy? And he threw your resume down there, and I go, oh, this looks interesting.
It was meant to be, I think.
And then we brought you out in November, and you came. And keep in mind, Ben had never taught before. Mm-hmm. But Ben was this wonderful sponge and wanted to know everything. And I really appreciated, in fact, I would say that the way you learned about how to teach, how to, would be a good model for anybody who wants to make that transition to teaching. Talk to us about that. Talk to us about that transition in those early days teaching, and then how you kind of really, now you're an excellent teacher. Thank and you've hit your stride.
I appreciate that.
And tell us about that transition into academia.
So it was not a transition I was ever expecting to make because, like you said, I had never taught before. I didn't go to school for teaching. I had no real background. But when I spoke to you, I had a great conversation with the dean. I had a great conversation with you. Clark Dumont was actually the one who connected me initially. He had worked with my brother-in-law. My brother-in-law works at MGM. And I was kind of hitting a wall as far as I knew I wanted to be in Vegas, but I didn't know what I wanted to do job-wise, because that was the hardest part of leaving Marvel, was just like, well, what do you do as a follow-up to something like that? And my brother-in-law said, you should talk to Clark, smart guy. Spoke to Clark, and he was the one who kind of put the bug in my ear. He's like, I think that they could maybe find a place for you over at the journalism school.
Now, keep in mind, tell Clark at that time was the VP of communication at MGM.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was. So he was, I had thought like...
Name dropper.
Yeah, I had thought like, oh, maybe you can get me a job at MGM. Instead, he was like, no, that's not what you need to be doing. This is where you need to be. I think you could really, he thought very highly of you and the dean. And he was like, I think these guys will really, you'll mesh well with them. And like you said, I came out, we figured out that it was a good fit and that I could potentially teach from my experience. But I think the key to learning to become a good teacher was willingness to listen to everyone. And by that, I mean, you listen to everyone and then you kind of parse through it and figure out what the good advice is. But I listened to you, I listened to people like Dave, but I also listened to the students. Like I said, I was like, I want to make every class kind of a discussion and understand like what's valuable to you guys. Like if it's going to be me talking for 20 minutes about my Marvel experiences, great. If it's going to be me doing some legwork and, doing some reading and bringing this to you guys, like what can I do to make the class the most valuable for you? And I definitely fell into like a lot of, man, when I was here that first winter, and I remember just being like 3 weeks straight, just making my syllabus and just like trying to plan out every element of everything. Like, we're going to have a test here, we're going to have a paper here, and I'm going to talk about this here and talk about this there. And it was probably like 2 semesters in, a lot of guidance from students, a lot of guidance from you guys, that got me more to the point of, it's good to have a broad outline of what you want to do, but you should allow for things to kind of develop on their own. So I became a lot less rigid. And I think that's like the new teacher thing, though. I think when you're a new teacher, particularly at the college level, you just get overwhelmed with, the more I can throw at these guys and the more I can plan, the better I'll do. And what I've learned is having just like, I know these are the things I want to do. The way I get there will be kind of determined by what kind of class it is, what the students are like, how receptive are they to conversation, and just stuff like that. So I feel like it's about listening, it's about adaptability, and it's about accepting that if someone gives you constructive criticism, it's not the end of the world. It's actually an opportunity to improve, which is like the most valuable thing you can get in this job.
Well, I can attest that none of Ben's students actually like him.
No, none of them. Yeah, they're.
They're usually lined up out his door.
Oh, God.
He's talking to them after class, in between classes. It's really great watching your interactions with your students, because it's clear that they like you as a professor. It's clear that you also have developed a relationship with them where you really see them, right? You get to know them kind of at the level where they are at, and to the point where you talk about kind of that philosophy of, kind of what the outcome of the class is going to be. You eventually want to get from A to Z, right? But that path isn't necessarily set in stone. So the way in which you do that can really be molded based upon the students that you have and kind of what's the dynamic like inside the classroom, so on and so forth. And the students, I feel like, really have responded well to that. Ben, Kevin talked to us a little bit about one of the reasons he was looking at you specifically to come to UNLV was to start up our digital and social media agency.
Right.
And we call it RMG, Rebel Media Group.
Right.
For folks who are listening to the podcast that aren't familiar with RMG, maybe talk to us a little bit about what is it? What do you guys do? And you've been running it for 5 years now.
5 years now, yeah.
And talk about your evolution, too.
Yeah, would love to hear about kind of really how this has developed over those 5 years.
I mean, it's been literally, I'd never done anything like it. I don't think any of us had done anything like it. I got a lot of good guidance early on. I remember we went to BYU and you sent me to Oklahoma, and I got a lot of good guidance early on about like what this could potentially be. But what I always liken it to was when I'm pitching it to students is I say, when I was in college, I did the college newspaper because I thought I wanted to get a job working for a newspaper. Here, we're fortunate to have KUNV. We're fortunate to have UNLV-TV, that if you want to do these things, like if you want to be a broadcaster, if you want to work in radio, TV, the best way for you to get prepared to do that is to actually do it in college. And Kevin made the very good point when I got here that we didn't have that for the students who were like, I maybe want to work in social media. I want to work in digital media. So the idea of RMG was, how do they get experience doing the things they're going to do, out in the real world while they're still at college? And the evolution, I would say, was just that when I started, I didn't know what I was doing. So it was a lot of hand-holding, and it was a lot of kind of, all right, well, I'm going to give you guys this real client, but I'm going to be over your shoulder constantly because I was running it more like a business than I was running it like a learning opportunity. And I think that was like the biggest thing I learned was it is in some ways a business. I mean, we make money and we have real clients who, if we let down, they're going to fire us. So we do have to run it somewhat like a business. On the other hand, my staff consists of, 20-year-olds who are learning as they go. And if I'm every step of the way micromanaging them, they're not going to learn anything. And the whole point of Rebel Media Group is for them to learn something. So I think the most valuable thing I've learned over the last 5 years is how to strike that balance between running a business responsibly, but also allowing my students to kind of not fail, but learn. And a big part of that has been finding the right clients. And a lot of times we've had clients who have been not the best fit because they come in expecting professional level work, which is great. But at the end of the day, I've got, 30 college students who are not necessarily going to be able to give you the same experience you'll get from a full service agency where that's all they're doing 24/7. These guys also go to school, they also have jobs, like they have a lot of stuff going on. So finding the right clients who are like, hey, we understand we're getting kind of a bargain as far as the financials. Like you're not charging us what a professional agency would charge, but we also understand that we're taking on college students who are going to kind of like learn in the process. The best clients are the ones who want to be interactive with the students, who want to like have weekly calls with them and basically be like, oh no, this is what you're doing wrong. This is what I would like differently. Like that's the best clients. And I think we've really, after 5 years of doing it, found like a really good sweet spot of that. It means taking a lot more of UNLV clients. So we might be working with the Department of Criminal Justice, or we might be working with student affairs. Those are usually the ones that I find work best. I think the thing we're still trying to figure out is how to best forge the same relationship with external clients. Because we've had a lot of external clients, but it feels like after a while, a lot of times what happens is we're their starter agency, and they'll stick with us for a year or two, and then they'll move on to a professional agency, which is fine. But I'm still kind of finessing that. And honestly, the biggest challenge, I tell everyone this, the biggest challenge of running Rebel Media Group is if you have a social media agency, typically, you are building up your staff, and then you're training that staff, and then you're running with that staff as long as you can. My staff turns over every 3 months. So I can put a lot of time into training these guys, but I've got to make sure that I'm also having them train, the people who are going to follow them. And it's just like that churn is the most difficult thing to deal with, but it's also kind of nice because I get to work with a lot of different people and, get exposed to different things.
And they've been letting you know when they get jobs as well.
Yes, that's the best part of my job is getting the emails from our alumni who are now out working. And we've had we've probably had at this point hundreds of students come through RMG. And there are so many incredible success stories, so many that are working in social media professionally now, and they'll keep me posted. And it's just a wonderful thing. And even like, when, and what's cool too is that a lot of them have kept in contact with each other. So they'll get each other jobs, or they'll work somewhere, and and then they'll tell me, they're like, oh yeah, we tell all our coworkers, like we met through this thing, RMG, and it was this great thing we got to do in college. And, that's always nice to hear. And the fact that they're successful, and they'll say, going back to kind of what I said, where I was always like, oh, I owe this guy my career in comics. They'll say like, oh yeah, I totally owe you. I wouldn't have my job without you. And Megan is quick to, every time I say, oh, this person said they wouldn't have their job without me, she's like, they got their job. She's like, you helped. She's like, you didn't do it. She's like, stay calm.
You do have a very supportive wife.
She's the best.
That keeps
She's
you
the best,
in your place.
Keeps you grounded.
He keeps me very grounded. She keeps me very grounded. Yeah.
Ben, as you think about the classes that you teach in podcasting and digital and social media, what excites you about this field right now?
What excites me the most about digital and social media is what has always excited me the most about digital and social media. And that's the ability to, we talked about it earlier, the ability to connect with people who are not necessarily, they might not be geographically close to you, but just this opportunity to bring the world kind of closer together. The fact that if I love comics, I can talk to, so many people who are passionate about the same thing I'm passionate about. And I also think for the students, from their perspective, going back to what they said about the whole LinkedIn thing, the fact that they can use social media to gain employment I always tell them, I go, the thing you should be doing is, what is the job you want? Find out who's doing it right now, and then find them on social media, because odds are you will be able to connect with them, and odds are they are going to want to help you. Believe it or not, like these people who have been doing this for a few years are flattered when a college student reaches out to them and says, like, I admire what you're doing. I want to learn how to do it. So I think that level of connection is very exciting. I also talk a lot in my digital media class about kind of the future of digital literacy. And I think that this next upcoming generation is going to be a lot better than necessarily our generation. Not to bag on our generation, but I think a lot of the problems that we discuss in class dealing with fake news and information pollution and stuff like that, I think these guys are a lot more savvy because they grew up with this stuff, and they're a lot more, they'll pay attention. Like my father might believe the first thing he clicks on because he remembers a day when you could kind of trust any news source. But a lot of my students are a lot more discerning. They're going to go look at point, counterpoint, and different sources, which I think they're better about. That's my hope, at least. That's my hope for the future, is that we're headed in the right direction.
And we should mention that you wrote the book about this.
Yes, at your prompting. I wrote, so last summer, I'm fond of saying that my son was born in May, and then I had my third child, which was a textbook, in July. It was supposed to be done in June, but I got a little bit thrown off. But yeah, I did write a digital textbook on digital and social media. I'm super proud of it. It's available digitally through Top Hat, my collaborator, and I'm actually looking forward to hopefully getting in there and changing some stuff this summer. Because the thing about digital media, and the reason I think it was so savvy of us to have a digital textbook as opposed to a hardbound textbook, is that really this should be changing every semester, because obviously the landscape of things like Twitter and TikTok completely changed in the last 3 months, and they change every 3 months. So I want to be able to give the most up-to-date information, and really, give an accurate depiction of what's going on in digital media. But I love my textbook.
That's great.
I'm a big fan.
That's great. Well, you also teach podcasting. I guess the last question I'd be interested in knowing about is, so you did get your master's while you were here. And tell me about that experience and how that may have changed you.
When I was younger, always wanted to get my master's. And I think the thing that stopped me from doing it was the thing I think stops a lot of people right after you graduate undergrad, where it's just the sense of, I've been in school for so long, I want to go and get a job. I can come back to this later. And getting my master's degree at the age I got it, with the kind of the interesting experience of having professors like yourself who were also my colleagues during the day. And then at night I was taking classrooms from you, from Ben Burrows, from a bunch of people. And then also being in class with some of my former students. Like I remember Brittany Barksdale was in my class with me, and she had just graduated, and we would do group projects together, and she would just kind of look at me like, well, what do we do next, professor? And I'm like, no, we're both students. We're on the same level. I'm not doing all the work. But I loved the opportunity to teach during the day, and then at night getting these incredible discussions with people. What I always tell people about the master's program, specifically here at JMS, was you get to talk about stuff you love and are passionate about with people who feel the same way for like several hours a week. And I'm like, and that's just the best. Like, you can't replicate that. Like, you might get to do that professionally. I was fortunate, like when I started working in comics, I was around a bunch of other 20-year-olds who also loved comics, and we talked about comics all the time. To me, the master's program was as close as I can get in my 30s and 40s to that experience that I had in my 20s of just being immersed in something that I love. And I could go and I could talk about Magneto for 3 hours, or I could, debate with someone about digital media. And I was always, whenever like there would be these classes where people would just be bagging on how social media was destroying the world, and then they'd remember that I was there. And I remember Greg Miller always used to be like, oh, Ben, do you want to speak on behalf of digital media? I'm like, sure, no problem. And then I would, give my spiel, but it was cool. It was fun. It was a great experience. And I'm looking to continue my education. It's not something I thought I would necessarily be doing. Like when I was 5 years deep at Marvel, I didn't think I would be coming out and going back to school, but it's been an incredible experience, and I'm looking forward to continuing on with it.
Great.
Anything we didn't ask you, Ben, about yourself?
No, you got everything.
All right. Anything that we should ask on behalf of Megan before we let you go?
Well, Dave, you know what it's like to get in trouble with.
Oh yes,
Megan. You've been in the doghouse.
Been in her doghouse.
You've been in the
before.
doghouse with Megan before, so no, I think it's all good. I'll end on the note I said earlier, where I just feel like personal life, professional life, everything has been great for me. I'm actually grateful to both of you for helping me so much with this journey, and I'm just thrilled to be here. And hopefully someone got something out of this podcast. I know that, like I told you guys, when I told my mom this morning that I was going to be talking about myself for an hour, she said, "Oh, good, your favorite thing." So hopefully someone other than just me enjoyed the experience.
Well, we enjoyed it, and it was great to have you. Thanks for joining us, Ben.
My pleasure.